Welcome to Between Two Clinicians, the podcast that gives you a backstage pass to the mind of two therapists. I'm Talia.
And I'm Adam.
Let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Between Two Clinicians.
Well, hello. We're at so much peace and zen, and we just beat our chakras, so we are good.
We're good. They're in alignment. We are here.
Everything. I'm telling you, the salt crystals are glowing. The essential oils are flowing. And
one with today. So
exactly.
Yeah. What is our topic? You nailed it in the way you describe it, so I want to let you take it.
Okay. So we were thinking, how the heck are we going to do a 30-minute podcast? So this is what we're going to come out with you today. It's called Me versus the World. This is something, this theme pops up in therapy all the time. I also get it in coaching a lot. But sometimes we forget that we are the only one that's seen as me versus the world. Like, the rest of the world's not playing. But I have taken on this personal mantra of I have to see everyone as a potential hostile force to either what I come to value, what my hierarchy of self-care and needs are. And we need to have the honest conversation that sometimes you're playing this role because it's easier for you to accept you have to do it alone versus realizing you have a concert of people who want to help you.
And I also would add to that, sometimes we audition, we create auditions for a role that doesn't actually exist because in our adult life, because we've been so like the role familiarity versus role comfort. Just because I've been doing something so one of the papers I'm writing, just because I've been doing something for a long time, I'm familiar with it, doesn't mean it's comfortable, but it could also mean that I'm slipping back into it because it's so familiar. So we create this audition for this role of it's me versus the world, when really I'm enlisting myself to solve everybody else's problem or be the martyr or whatever else, because it feels like I'm always the one who says who. Like who is creating that feeling? So I from what you shared, I see it from both angles as like, if there are people who are wanting to support you, why thwart their efforts? And if there aren't, why continue to enable and engage in those kinds of relationships where it truly does feel like you versus the world, or that it's like whack-a-mole is what I call it with my clients. It's like, I just can't seem to catch my breath and get up.
Yeah, I find it normally this thought process is born out of necessity. I truly believe that some point in your life, it was survival. You had to put the whole world on your back and you went forward. And here's the crazy thing is you stepped into a tremendous amount of power when you did that. You normally go from completely being inactionable to being very actionable. And then as you see your influence build, you sort of create this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Which is, I essentially have to be a warrior with whoever I'm engaging, right? Like
anyone can be a threat. Yeah.
Anyone's a threat. It's sort of like every game you're playing for keeps. You're always going all in. But then what we're not recognizing is sometimes we are actually at peace. Like this is peacetime. There's not someone who's being aggressive to me. I don't have a war that I need to be waging. But then all of a sudden our insecurities flood in because we're like, well, wait a second. I know how to be a hammer really well. And so if everything's a nail, then I'm very, very successful. But if you're talking about I have to then unpack the emotions that I compartmentalized in that journey, this sounds uncomfortable. It sounds like something I don't want to do. The difference is what I'm trying to communicate here is I don't believe you lose your influence by becoming more emotionally intelligent. I feel like you're going to grow your influence. But the difference is there's going to be instances where I have to come to accept that I am not the one that's going to fix something.
Right. It doesn't fall on me and it's not my job or role or response, or it's not something I have power to do. And to your point about moving from being quite inactionable to very actionable, typical development is that we are starting the world very powerless. We need our parents or whoever's holding us to even hold our neck up. And we slowly start to gain or quickly start to gain the strength as we get older, as we develop more resources, as we fortify ourselves and our sense of self, we firm up.
Yeah.
as a person. And I think we become more solid and we start to gain power by different interactions, and we start to really realize our own power. When we are tasked, to your point, from this survival, it's this technique from such a young age that it is us versus the world, or we're forced into it being us versus the world. We develop from too young of an age an inordinate sense of power that we then don't know how to use. It's like being gifted superpowers too young with no instruction manual. I think that's
and every 3-year-old is there. Every 3-year-old is like, I know I'm probably going to hate having a 3-year-old, but I love being around 3-year-olds because they are the most badass little creatures on the face of the planet. They come strolling in. They got their sippy cup in one hand. They got like the binky or blanket in the other. They're like, what do you have? You ain't got nothing. Like, like I ain't responsible for shit, even my own shit. And so, and then I think if you pay attention, there is this. I feel like that 3 to 5 mark, you can actually like identify the same anxieties, senses of depression, emotional complications that like 18 to 35-year-olds are experiencing. And people go, well, why is it? I think it's because we go through these different developmental stages where we get this overarching sense of we have tremendous amounts of power and influence on our worlds. And then we have certain things that sort of jostle us awake that we actually have very little control in many different ways. I can control how I behave, but I can't control how someone receives that, or someone's desire to be in my life, or even just because I say something really well doesn't mean that someone else is also going to find value in my thoughts.
So true. And what you're describing makes me think of when I teach about Erikson's psychosocial stages of development, that at that preschool age, that 3 to 5, the basic conflict is initiative versus guilt. So children need to begin asserting that control and power over their environment to develop that sense of self. Ideally, if we're successful, it leads to that sense of purpose, or that sense of being able to control and access power. But if you try to exert too much control or power over the experience and it's met with disapproval, that will result in a sense of guilt. So that's like, if it's incomplete and we don't process it properly, we end up feeling incredibly guilty and disempowered. Oh, yeah. So it can go in 2 different directions. And as you and I know, as you're building up those psychosocial stages, it's almost like a ladder. It's like incomplete here leads to a rocky development here, it's like a chutes and ladders almost as you're growing psychosocially.
It's so funny. It's a flow chart of hell. It's like, if not this, that. And like, like, yeah, exactly. Why doesn't the arrow go that way?
Without enough responsibility to have that power. And I think, to your point, it really does lead to that mindset of, I can't rely on anyone. It's this hyper independence, fiercely self-reliant, and often suspicious, all the way to paranoid. I can't trust anyone's intentions. They weren't there for me. They're trying to take away my power. I think this is where you're going with it. They're not going to help me, so I'm going to cut this off, and I have to do this all by myself all the time.
Yeah. Because what I typically see is, and I see the person that's been on this, like, it's like the Book of Eli, right? Like, you're on this road yourself. It's just been you. And it's funny because if, like, I could only get you to look around, you'd actually see a bunch of people who are healthy, who do desire to be in your world, but you're telling them, oh, no, I can't see you. I can't utilize you. I can't. And please don't get this wrong. I know that there are certain people that you don't have a concert of support around you. But my question then is, what are you doing to help build that concert of support? I believe as human beings, we have innately been gifted with a desire for fellowship. And so even though there's times that we go through life that it's going to be quite lonely because we don't have those people around us that are healthy or in their own emotional stages of development to be allies with us in this, I don't think we're designed to be alone, because for some reason we always seek out fellowship. Now, if you're telling me, oh no, Adam, it's just me versus the world, now realize that every day you're waking up and you're actively dismissing a part of yourself. You're saying that part doesn't exist. No, it does. It probably also manifests itself in different ways. Maybe you're drinking more because you're trying to suppress that side. Maybe you're having more risky relationships. Maybe there's actually this other side of it of people aren't as emotionally hesitant to connect with you as you are with them. Like, imagine the shell shock of being like, hey, I had to put myself together through a very traumatic time in my life. Now I have a person in front of me that actually is asking me like what I'm all about. They want to like know how I tick. Like that's extremely vulnerable. I can get a hesitation to that. But I'm wondering if there's moments that you see true desire to connect as being a red flag when in reality you're more than willing to engage in red flag behaviors that lead to a quick turnover in attachment.
Mm-hmm. Quick disconnect, I would say,
mm-hmm.
or like momentary connection that is fleeting,
mm-hmm.
because it's the level of vulnerability required to sustain it is something either so uncomfortable, so inaccessible, or so foreign that we don't move into that position or flex our comfort muscle in that way to be like, oh, this is scary as hell, but I'm going to lean in and do it. So I'll just settle for this moment. It's not me versus the world. I can let one person in, but by my control and by my power, and then I can ask them to leave. So it's still from that self-reliant position, I would say.
Absolutely. But there's a sense of control there that we say we don't have. Oh, no one wants to be. It's almost like you leave your phone on silent and you say, no one ever calls. Well, have you ever looked at your phone? Like, I think people are calling. Like, no one ever calls. Have you ever turned it on? Have you ever charged it? Like, there's no one ever calls. Yeah, right? No like, I don't know, man. Like,
that's what they want to be close to. Yeah. Yeah.
But this is the thing that floods in. How are we turning into being our own, like, it's almost like it's our own barrier to further development. Like, no one wants to accept that. What do you mean it's me? It's got to be someone else. It could actually be that you're choosing not to participate in certain ways. Mm-hmm. And I get it. At one point in time, you had to do it. But now we're at peacetime. We could start building friends. And I'm seeing this more like when I'm working with my C-level executives, like especially like if they're males that haven't had families yet, they're waking up to like maybe they've gotten to those regional positions, those VP positions, like whatever it might be. But they're 36 or they're 37, and now they're starting to look in the rearview mirror and they're starting to go like, well, I do want a family. Like I do want kids. And now there's like this hyper rush to how do we bring this about, right? But what you're actually like, when you're on a date, you're not on an interview. But a lot of guys who have been what I would call like high impact or high performance individuals, they go on relational dates as if they're interviewing. They're like, good breeding stock.
Yeah. Shiny hair, wide hips. Yeah.
Like hips, 8 out of 10. Like,
ratio.
And then they're like, oh, these women just say there's no connection. Well, shit, there's no connection. Like, that's not chemistry. That's a tape measuring session. Like they want to know about you, and you just are like, so what attributes do you have to give me what I want? Now, is it really?
And
you can't,
because then I can be vulnerable once you've met my. It's like
and they won't even be vulnerable then.
No, you're bringing them into the lab. Like we didn't mean literal chemistry where you're doing tests with Bunsen burners. Like we meant that sense of a spark. Yeah. I don't know. The girl's like, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Not a real redhead. Not like it's like like it is.
You must be this this much of a match to be given access to my vulnerability, but even then I don't think I'll fully lean in.
Oh, absolutely, because we lie to ourselves. Oh, once I find the perfect one, no, because you're going to continue to keep that boundary up. And then like let's talk about how these relationships develop, because if you're saying it's you versus the world and then you get a fellow traveler with you, it's us versus the world, right? And no, it's me versus the world. This is my secretary who I sleep with. Like that's not the same thing.
No.
And so I always find it interesting when we walk down this thought process, because for many people, like even the inverse of that is, again, women who have been highly successful, and either they've stayed the course in doing what they want to do. Maybe they created a brand. Maybe they are in a C-level position, whatever it is. Whatever you wanted, you achieved. But now when we talk about, okay, well, you're saying you want a family and you want these things, then it's like, oh, well, then now I have to view anyone coming into this system as inherently hostile.
Yes, it's a false positive that the person should be seen as a threat.
Yeah. And, this is the breakdown. I'm all good with saying, like, men do it too, women do it too. We do it in different ways. Right? True.
Very true.
But this is where it's like, again, how do I date someone who has essentially made a decision in their life that is just me versus the world? Yeah. Doesn't sound like there's much room. Like you're Rose on the door. Like, yeah. Is there room up there? There's no room. Okay. Yeah. All right.
But it could. And then I think being the receiving partner, now that we're talking about it more, being the receiving partner, dating somebody who is walled off or has these certain parameters that must be met, honestly, and before any vulnerability is being shown, there's something about the person that the people they might be interacting with that furthers that narrative, because it takes a specific kind of person, or there is a specific kind of person who feels the me versus the world. It's myself and it's just me. And there's a specific kind of person that wants to partner with that kind of person. Do they see it as if the person is leading with it, do they see it as a challenge to overcome? Well, I'll be the exception, I'll show, and then it fuels the whole self-worth and then the self-reliance cycle. And if it's not that, and it's you don't know that until you're going on the date or getting to know the person, it really doesn't leave much room for other people to want to get to know you, because you're literally telling me you don't want to let me in. It's you versus the world, and I'm never going to get close to you in the ways that I want, so I'll leave, thus furthering the I would say the narrative of, well, see, everybody I love leaves me. It is really me versus the world because nobody stays, because nobody this. And I'm not sure if you were thinking about this when you were first asking the question, what is the role of that self-worth or that psychic state of the individual who is me versus the world? It's not a survival technique anymore.
No, and that's why I wanted to call it out, because a lot of times we'll use it for that statement as such a position of power, like it's always been me versus the world. Like in certain ways, it sounds awesome because you hear this person make this massive development or make this change in their life, but then they keep holding on to it. Like I always think of it as sort of like a boat anchor. At one point in time, it was good. It moored you to something that was safe, right? Like you had a safe harbor, you were out of the storm. Now what happens when that water level rises? Because now that same thing that you're like, well, this was safety at some point in time, it's now liability. It's pulling you under the water.
Exactly.
But the difference is you keep telling yourself, I can hold my breath a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. At some point, you're going to lose both. Like it just doesn't work that way. And so being able to take a step back and go, well, wait a second. I don't think in this 30 minutes you're going to solve your life, but the aha moment I want is maybe you stepping back and saying, okay, well, maybe it is developing a list of people that have been around me and have shown me consistent patterns of being safe and secure individuals. And how do I not utilize these people in my life? Like, why am I willing to call them up and say, let's go out and party, let's go have a great time, let's have these gourmet experiences. But then, like, when I'm having a bad day, I don't call anyone. Because you're only reinforcing that narrative in your head. Oh, I have no one to call. No one would want to do that.
It's going to be there.
But you're okay controlling the situation if you're the one that's like maybe throwing out abundance. Oh, I'll pay everyone's bar tab. Like we're good. Everything's fine. And so you're actually coming to make a statement of acceptance on how much you're willing to invest. It's not about them.
No.
It's you saying, well, I will let you participate in this, but I won't let you participate in that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, I think, different parameters put on it. And for the person who is writing that list, let's say you're the one listening, and like you said, you're not going to solve all your life's problems in 30 minutes. That's what therapy, no, I'm just kidding. That's what short-term brief intensive therapy is for. No. going to solve it, but you can get to deeper understanding within yourself if you are the kind of person who is put together or constructed in a way that you are more comfortable reaching out when things are going well and less comfortable reaching out when it may be more vulnerable or there may be support that you might have to ask for. Really take yourself to task and look inward. What is it about that pattern? What do I gain from it? What am I potentially losing from it? And what would my life be like if on the flip side, I let people in the positive times and the potentially vulnerable times? Could I still love myself the same? Do I love myself now? Am I waiting for someone to come in and climb all those walls? I think this is a deeper existential exploration that this lays a really nice foundation for.
Yep.
Yeah, there's something about that. And there's something about the pattern. I know when I mentioned earlier, the pattern of why people, what is it about those situations that people, whether they're forced or whether they choose to continue to engage in those patterns, and what are some of the players, who are some of the other players on the board that keep you engaging in that pattern? If your pattern is not woe is me, I'm not mimicking or mocking when I share this, but it's like, why do I always like, you could be seriously asking yourself, like, why do I always find myself in these situations where I feel like the victim? I feel like I'm being tasked with being everybody's savior. I feel like it's my responsibility in that me versus the world sense. What is it about those situations that feels inescapable if it does? What is it about those situations where the other players on the board are reinforcing those patterns where it's like, no, it's you. You're the responsible one. You're the financial one. You're the this one. This is what, and I've worked on that with clients in the last month. I would say that's been a theme coming up, taking accountability and recognizing if that pattern is at play, what is it about that makes you feel like you can't stop participating? Because there truly might be some extortion or something going on where they can't leave, or there might be, wow, I never even thought to think of it that way. Might require some uncomfortable conversations, some family dynamic shifts. Often avoid what's on the other side, which I think is what you're sharing. We have to sometimes go through the valley of it is me versus the world, because I had to cut off people who were using me. But that doesn't mean on the other side of it, I'm not going to find other people who could be more supportive. So yes, the restructuring might look as though you don't have the same support system, but that does not mean you have no support system.
Well, I mean, and you put it so well right there, is if I'm not intentionally creating space for people to come in, then I'm probably not doing it to the most healthy way it could be done. Because if I'm not creating space for other people to come in, and what I'm doing is I'm pruning, I'm literally cutting off more and more to now I have less of me available. I'm literally going to get to a spot where I'm not going to have much to give, because I have always pruned and cut back and shrunk myself. And this process is not about making you smaller. It's about making you more conducive to greater things. Like that's where we're going with it. And a lot of people go, well, that sounds really vulnerable. It sounds very too much exposure for me. I could be leveraged. Well, you're bringing up potentially all the negative aspects of it. Why can't having intimacy actually be something beneficial? Intimacy doesn't have to be something where the exposure is malicious. Like being out there and in front of other people and then being accepted for who you are might actually be a catalyst for more growth than you would ever get out of basically trying to impose your will on the world around you. Yeah.
And I think it's not that I think this, I know the true definition of vulnerability because I've taught it to my students before and my clients. It's the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility, not the guarantee, the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. It's that risk. It's that's in the dictionary. It's that tipping point. Could it be that happens? Yes. Will that be? Not necessarily. And I think that's one of the gifts of vulnerability is knowing who to, not who to expose yourself around. That sounds very inappropriate. Who to create a situation where it could potentially cause some harm. And I'm not saying that you're wanting that to happen, but like, pick the safest person that if the harm were to happen or there were to be a rupture, there'd also be an opportunity for repair.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be 100% without any risk that you're going to get close to somebody. That's the nature, also why vulnerability in that sense and intimacy feels so good, because you are leaning into this person and they're not hurting you.
Yeah. Well, remember, we're always managing the risk.
Yep.
Like, I am never going to ask you, go do something that's going to be extremely, like, it's beyond risky.
A risk is different than a guarantee. Going back to somebody who has used your vulnerability against you is a guarantee of getting hurt. Not giving somebody an opportunity who could hurt you is really foregoing the opportunity for what vulnerability could be. At least that's how I do it. Not anybody can hurt you. Not everybody will hurt you.
Correct. I mean, that's really well said, because we can step back and we can say that's the reality of the situation. Sure, I'm putting myself in places where I could be hurt, but then I could also be healed. Like, the repair could happen. The repair is not going to happen if you're not present. So if you're not willing to commit, then you're right. You're going to live the same narrative. I think the other aspect where I wrestle with people, whether it's in coaching or in therapy, is being able to talk about, like, you talk about how you have done this for 10 years, for 15 years, for 30 years. How about waking you up to the fact that you don't have 30 years of experience doing it this way? You have 30 years of every year doing it the same way.
Ooh.
Like don't act like this has been something where you have gathered more data and research. This isn't a 30-year case study. This is 30 times you lived the same year. And when you can come to recognize, like, oh, wait a second, what does that mean? That means there is no growth opportunities. That also means that you come to accept that change will never happen. You're not seeking change. You're seeking validation and actually like a justification. Now, here's the crazy thing. You will start choosing the things that are more risky and more detrimental to your own success to continue to feed the narrative. That's why I can sit down with certain people and I can provide them with, like, maybe a little bit of awareness, saying, wow, this sounds like we're going to have the same result. Or we could try this thing. There's not a lot of risk exposure. There's not a lot, but it would require intention, and we'd have to do things different. Person's like, give me the fucked up situation.
Yeah, I'll pick that. At least I know it.
Why? Well, you said the other one's hard. The reality of the situation, they're both difficult.
They're both extremely difficult, yeah.
I'm just thinking that one is done with purpose and intention, and the other one is done with sort of a constant.
Yeah.
We know how the story ends, but the story sucks.
Mm-hmm. But I know how it ends.
But I know how it ends.
Knowing it over the unknown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This gives people a lot to chew on. I think this is a existential foundation that will lay nicely for our satirical subsequent episode. But our next episode, I think part 2 of this may not come next time. Next time we're going to be talking about something. I'm not going to give away the title because I want to let people be shocked and amazed by it when they hear it next time. But if you have ever felt the desire or the need to shift away from your family of origin and create a family of your own, and the difficulty of that, next episode will be for you. So please tune in next time.
Well, we appreciate you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah. Like us if you do, please subscribe, leave comments. And then if you have any questions, you can always DM us or answer our Q&As. I'm at Talia Bombola on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. And Adam is at Wild Ethos Counseling.
Yep.
I memorized it. Cool. I'm impressed.
Woo! Well, yes, always drop a line.
Yes. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.